Hello, today I'm be showing you guys how to overclock your GPU. I'm going to try to make this tutorial very short. So let's get into it. First thing you're going to want to do is install MSI Afterburner. Type that into Google. Go to MSI's site. Scroll down and you click this download tab. And you download MSI Afterburner. And during the install, it is going to ask you to install River Tuner. I'd recommend you do so you can use the overlays. And then if you want to download a stress tester, you can download this kombuster. And you're also going to want to download Eugen Heaven. Let's go to Eugen's website, go to benchmarks, you click on Heaven, and then you click the free download. You can also download Valley and Superposition. Now I recommend you download Superposition because that's a very good stress tester for GPU memory overclocks, and for GPU core clocks overclocking, I'd recommend you use Heaven. Now you can also go to 3D Mark and then download their 3D Mark software, which is going to look like this. Just let it load. So you go to benchmarks and you run the free time spy, and this is one of the only free DirectX 12 benchmarks that you can do is time spy, and it's also one of the most demanding ones. So it's a very good stress tester as well. I like time spy. That's what I actually mostly used instead of Heaven, but I think if you want to do something that's a little quicker, then Heaven loads up a little quicker because it does take a little while for time spy to load up. And then I'll also show you what Valley looks like. I just use the default settings and I'm at 1440p, so you just hit run. I just keep everything at the default. Same thing for Heaven. And for Superposition, I actually does not have a 1440p option, which I don't like. It just has 1080p and 4K, so I just put it on 1080p high, even though I'm using a 1440p monitor, and I hit run. So when you're doing your video memory overclocks, you want to use this as a stress tester. And when you're overclocking your core clocks, just use Heaven because it loads in pretty fast. So once you've downloaded those, you'll also want to download GPU-Z. You can also download CPU-Z. Now currently my CPU is at stock, but I do have XMP profile at 2933. So you just download GPU-Z. And the graphics card I'm working with is a RX 570. It's 8 gigabytes and it's using micron memory. Now you can go to that advanced tab, go to this drop down, and you can click on ASIC quality if you want to know what your ASIC quality is. So mine's at 81.4%. But we're mostly going to go to the sensors tab and just monitor our voltages. And then you can monitor the other stuff, but MSI does that as well. But MSI doesn't have a graph for voltage control. As you can see down here, it doesn't have it. So that's why we need GPU-Z, so we can monitor our voltages. So once you got MSI Afterburner, hopefully it looks just like this. The first thing you want to do is go to this little wheel thing, click on that, go to the general tab, the first tab, go down here and you unlock voltage monitoring, because right now yours is probably going to be saying 0 millivolts. So if you unlock this and then you hit restart, you then should see what millivolts your GPU is running at. So mine's running at 900. You also want to unlock voltage control, and you might also want to force constant voltage, because I usually do my overclocking because I have an AMD graphics card through Wattman, because I like to use Wattman instead of Afterburner. But if you don't have an AMD graphics card, you'll have to use Afterburner. So just try to follow along with Afterburner. So it'll be mostly doing it through this. But basically, if I were to have my stock clock at 1245 and lower this to 900, Wattman will not allow me to go under 900. And the same thing for memory. But we can't adjust the voltage for memory on Afterburner. But let's just say this, let's say I drop this to 900, it will not let me go under 900. So to force it, you would have to check mark this force constant voltage and actually minus here, and then hit this check mark to apply, and to reset you hit this button in the middle. So basically to overclock, this is all you really need to do. So you start here, or in Afterburner, and you do not touch the voltage, and you just keep increasing this by 20 at a time. So let's say if I go to like 460, and then I hit apply. And then once I apply that, you then run your Heaven benchmark, and I would recommend you have it run at least once and see if it crashes. And if it doesn't crashes, then you go back to MSI Afterburner, and then you exit out of the Heaven, increase this by another 20. And if you're lazy, you can go by 50s. So let's say if I'm lazy, so I'll just go by 50s. So I'll hit this, check. And then you run Heaven again, see if you get any crashes or artifacts. And you probably wonder what do the artifacts look like. They'll probably be like pixel squares, or you might get like smudges that are like blue and red. That's what I get. Or some other type of graphical error. So any type of graphical artifacts. Or if you get crashes, then you just hit escape, or you hit the quit button with your mouse. And for a last resort, you hit Control Alt Delete, bring up the task manager, and then just hit this thing if it crashes. And if it hard crashes, you will have to restart your computer. So you just keep increasing this by 20, or if you're lazy, 50 at a time. So for me, I am able to go all the way up to 1450. 1460 is fine. 1470 is fine. But near the end of this benchmark on Heaven, near the windmill part, I start seeing artifacting if I put this at 1480 or 1490. And if I put this at 1500, I get a crash. So I decide, so if you keep increasing this by 20, and you see, so let's say if you keep increasing this by 20, and let's say you only got to, let's say 1440, before you start seeing artifacting and crashing, then I'd recommend you just back it down to like 1400, and you should be stable at that. Now, when I increase my core clock, it actually goes into a higher power state. So when I'm running at stock 1245, it actually only uses 1031 millivolts. And when I overclock to 1450, it actually uses 1150 millivolts. And this actually does not allow me to go higher than 1150. So if I wanted to try to hit 1500 stable, I would have to increase the millivolts, but your power consumption would go up. Hopefully I didn't hit apply on that, because I probably could have just crashed. So yeah, so you would have to force it on MSI Afterburner. So for me, I can get up to 1450. Then once you've reached your max stable overclock, now you probably want to run all those other benchmarks to make sure you're stable. Once you've done that, you then want to start undervolting, because you want to save power consumption. Now for me, I'm only able to get this to 1130. So you go to MSI Afterburner, and then you'd go minus 20. Because if I put force voltage control in here and I put minus 20, then that's going to minus 20 from the 1150, the max power state. So I'll just hit reset on that. So I can only go to 1130. It starts to artifact from between 1120 to about 1070, and then it crashes at 1060 for me. So for me, I can undervolt this to 1130. Now when I'm running Heaven or a video game like Vermintide, I'm only saving 10 watts with this. If I'm overclocked and I run this at 1130 instead of 1150, I only save 10 watts. Now if I run this at stock, so let's say like in Vermintide, which I'll actually show you the benchmarks. I'll just show you the benchmarks that I have. So basically once you found your lowest millivolts, then you can move on to memory. Now for me, it does not let me lower this voltage below 900, so I cannot save any wattage by undervolting this. So this is locked at 900, so I'd just recommend you leave this at automatic. And Afterburner doesn't even have a voltage control for memory. So yeah. So when you're in Afterburner, you just start increasing this by 50 or 100 at a time and hitting the check mark to apply. But I like to do it through Wattman. So memory, you could do a little faster. So instead of going like 20 or 50 at a time for core clock, memory, you can probably just go at 100 at a time. And I'm able to get mine all the way up to 2150. Now, I was able to run Time Spy and Fire Strike at 2250. But when I ran that superposition benchmark, because that's actually a better benchmark for video memory, it crashed at 2200 or higher. So I can only get up to stable up to 2150 with the 900 millivolts. And that's basically it. So you just keep increasing this 50 at a time until you start seeing artifacting. And so let's say if you have the same GPU, and let's say you started seeing artifacting at, let's say, 2100. So you back it off to 2050 and see if it's stable. And if it's not stable, then you back it off to like 2000. And you should be good. And this is basically free performance because the millivolts only stay at 900. So I don't get increased wattage. So let's say so that's basically it. There's one thing I actually forgot that's very important. Very important. If I were to overclock this to 1450, to keep that 1450 overclock, you gotta have this power limit slider all the way to the max. Mine only goes up to 20, so most of the time I am able to keep 1450, but sometimes it dips. So if you don't have this power limit all the way over, it's not going to keep the overclock at the clock speed that you put it at. Same thing if your GPU is throttling. So for example, if my GPU hits 85C, it's going to start throttling. So you also want to make sure this slider is all the way, and make sure your power limit is all the way up. This is perfectly safe. So if your power limit goes up to 100 or 200, just slide it all the way over. It just makes sure that you hit the clock speed that you're getting. So this is perfectly safe to adjust. Just boom, all the way to the right. All right, so now that I showed you how to overclock, I'm now going to show you my benchmark numbers. Now I'm not going to show you an actual benchmark run because my webcam doesn't really work right when I actually hit the run button on here. So I'm just going to show you my benchmark numbers. So let's start with Heaven. Open this to full screen. Let's see. So you can see our core clock is stock, memory clock is at stock, voltage is at stock for the clock speeds. So in Heaven and Valley, we get it between 115 to 125 watts. Now when we undervolted, which I'm able to undervolt at stock clocks to all the way down to 900, which by the way, when you tell 900 in Wattman, it's actually 25. It comes up 25 lower here. So I just wanted to mention that. Now we're down to 90 to 100 watts. So we're saving about 25 to 35 watts now. And does the performance get worse? And the answer is absolutely kind of no. I only went down about 2 frames. Actually, it kind of ignored this first one because there was a hiccup on the minimums. So if we just look at the Heaven, there is kind of like a 4 FPS difference. But we're saving like 35 watts. Now if we look at the overclocks for Heaven and Valley, which I didn't use the built-in one, I actually just used MSI Afterburner benchmark for these two, so that built-in score. So you know how I did say it was artifacting at 1490, but it didn't crash, so I did run a benchmark on 1490, and then obviously 1450, and then 1450, but with the memory overclock, and the memory was obviously at 900 millivolts, and then obviously when I overclock, it's normally at 1150, but I can only undervolt to 20 less millivolts, so I only got to 1130. So you can see when we're at 1150 millivolts on the core clock, 150 to 160. When we undervolt it only 20, I only save 10 watts when running these benchmarks. Now what about the performance? Because one was 1490 with stock memory, then one was at the stable 1450 with stock memory, and then the stable 1450 but with the overclocked memory. So what's the performance? Let's look at Valley. 62 average, 62, 63. So with the memory, since the memory is a free performance, I did get about 1 frame better, but not really worth it. Not really worth it. And we look at Heaven, same thing. Not really worth it. About 1 frame, 60, 59, 61. So about 1 frame on the average is better. And you can look at all these other numbers yourself. But basically, overclocking the core clock pretty much just increased power consumption. It wasn't really worth it. If I ran the Heaven and the Valley stock at the 1244 megahertz, then this power consumption would be around 120. Which I actually have it right here. Yeah, see, if I ran it, so let's look at the stock versus overclock, for example. So here's stock, right? And here's stock underclocked, undervolted. So I'm at 90, 100 watts. What's the average FPS? 57, 54. What was the highest here? So maybe about another 5, maybe 10 frames at the most higher. So I got 5 more frames, but the wattage is about, the wattage on this is about 50 to 60 watts higher. Is 60, 50 watts higher worth the 5 frames per second? To me, That's an absolute no. For me, no. So, and to be honest, I didn't run this benchmark with the, I undervolted it, but I didn't run a benchmark with the memory overclocked. But if I did, that would be free performance because I'd still get the 90, 100 watts, and I'd probably get the five frames back, so somewhat. Maybe one, I'll get like 1 or 2 frames back if I overclock the memory, and it would not affect the power consumption. So basically, overclocking basically just eats up power consumption, so not worth it. So let's move on to the next one. So let's do benchmarks. So you can see the same thing here, stock with undervolt, and then I did that 1490 with the stock here, and then that, and then did this this overclock, this stock, and then this undervolted. And you can see versus this one here at 1150 versus 1130, there's only a 10 watt difference in fire strike and time spy and super precision benchmark. And then here's that, but then I also overclocked the memory, and you can see the power consumption is the same. So when you overclock the memory, you get free performance. Oh, by the way, I was able to run fire strike and time spy at 2250, but was not able to get that stable in super precision benchmark, so I dropped it to 2150. And see the power consumption is still the same. So did our numbers improve from stock to overclock? The answer would be actually yes. Also, there is an anomaly I did find out. If I ran this at the stock voltage, my GPU score would go up just a tiny bit, but my CPU score would actually go down a little bit. So when I undervolt, I get a little less GPU score, but I get a little higher CPU score. And this is combined score, by the way. So you can see 10, 7, so that definitely went up. And 1490 actually only got a little higher than 1450, so diminishing returns anyway, so I'd rather keep the 1450 stable. And in here, you know, when I overclocked the memory, I actually got a lower score on fire strike. And the time spy, you know, yeah, definitely went up. Here it actually went up a little bit, even though the clock speed went down, so I guess margin of error. But when I overclocked the memory, pretty much no difference. Actually, no, that was memory overclock. No difference. Now, the only difference that memory did make a difference is in the super precision benchmark. My benchmark actually did go up when I overclocked the memory, as you can see here, 5385, 5534. And when I increased this all the way to 2190, this benchmark actually went all the way up to 5900. So memory overclocks definitely make this score go up. But you can see the frame rate isn't much different. It's only like 1 or 2 frames, so, but it's free performance. So there's one more benchmark I want to show you guys, is Vermintide. This is a video game. So you can see I ran it stock, but then I also ran it stock undervolted. Now when we undervolted, you can see I saved 30 watts, but did the performance decrease? It only decreased by about 2 frames per second. So I rather save the 30 watts. Now let's show you the overclock. So overclock, you can see I did run a 1490, 1450 at stock memory, and then 1450 at overclocked memory. And then on these two, I obviously ran at 1130 instead of 1150. So you can see 140 to 160, and then when I ran it at 1130, we saved about 10 watts. But did our performance get much better? So if we look at these two, so what's our wattage at? 130 to 150? Well, this one is at about 120 at stock, but when I undervolted 90. So if we compare this 90 to this 130, let's say this is 140. That's about 50 watts more. How much higher is the FPS? Almost 10. Almost 10. But mind you, I ran this benchmark without overclocked memory. Remember, if I overclocked that memory, I would get free performance. So this number would have been higher. It would be more like 57 probably. So only 5 frames lower. And is the 50 watts more worth it? I would say no. And also I kind of want to show you something here. Stock memory. And then the core clock went a little lower. Did the frame rate go lower? Only about 1 frame when we lower the core clock. But when we left the core clock the same but overclocked the memory, look how much more frames I got when overclocking the memory in this game. About 5. See, when I overclocked the core, actually put it this way, 58, 57. Versus stock, what was I getting? 55? That was only like 2-3 frames when I overclocked the core. Now when I had the core overclocked and I also overclocked the video memory, Now I got like 5 frames, so I got more frames when I overclocked the memory in this game. So if I overclocked this memory, this number would be a lot closer to this number, but then I would be saving 50 watts. And before I end it here, I actually want to mention one more thing. If I undervolt, if I leave this at stock, and if I would have overclocked this and got free performance and got the 5 frames, and then, you know, undervolted, I would get about 90 watts in this game, right? But guess what? There's something called Radeon Chill. So you go here, the Radeon, you go to gaming, and you can go to global, or you can click on the game. So let's say we click on the game. And I think you actually have to go to global and enable. So you actually have to go to global and enable chill, and then you go here. So I have it at 3060 right now. So when I enable Radeon Chill, when I'm moving my mouse really quick like this, it'll go up to 60 frames, and then it'll go up to 90 watts. But when I'm not doing anything, it'll drop to 30 frames, and then my wattage goes all the way down to about 70 watts in that game. And that game uses quite a lot of watts. If I'm playing something like StarCraft Remastered, like without Radeon Chill on, but with an undervolt, I'm already using like 70 watts. So with Radeon Chill, I'm probably dropping to like something like 40 watts in that game for the GPU. So basically, that's how you overclock your GPU, you guys. So thank you for watching.